story is what I would like to call owning your shit. Okay. Like I'm owning this. I'm owning my mistakes. And I think that's important for people to do. I do that as well. Right. I was very surprised that it came from a presidential candidate's running mate. It appears that Tim Walz had a recent interview. Yes, apparently Tim Walz is still doing interviews. Kamala, not so much. I think she should. But Tim Walz is doing interviews. And in this particular podcast, he is questioned about what could they have done differently? What can they do better? And to my surprise, Tim Walz actually admits where they went wrong. This is, and I was surprised by this, and I think you're going to be surprised too, because this is not what we're hearing Kamala say. Like, Kamala Harris is nowhere to be found for interviews. She's attending image award ceremonies, right? She's going to plays and all that kind of stuff. But even though you lost, you should still continue interviews at this point in time. I think that's just the right thing to do. And this podcast that Tim Walz went on to, I mean, this isn't a large, it's not a big platform, right? It's a smaller podcast, but he went on there. I believe he already knew this young woman based on the beginning of the conversation when she said, I text you. So apparently they already knew each other. But he went on to a smaller podcast, which I think more politicians should do. I know Khanna does this, not so much for a lot of the other ones. But listen to where he accepts responsibility here. Listen to this.
I mean, you guys have a lot more power. Like, one of the things that I always fault Democrats for is that, or at least I looked at Republicans, during Biden's administration, we saw Texas really, and Florida, really just be like, we're doing our own thing. Yes. Now, and Democrats can do that to a certain extent, right? I mean, they may be punished. Yeah. So talk us through that.
Yes. And look, I hear the thing out there is that when we get back, which we'll fight. I'll tell you what people are going to expect is they're not going to expect us to tinkle around the edge with the ACA. They're going to expect universal health care. And if there's a lesson here, I always said this, we had a 1-vote majority in Minnesota when.
Okay. Did everybody hear what he just said? What people are going to expect from the Democratic Party. That part is especially crucial. I'll play it again. We'll go back just a little bit. Again, for those just joining, I'm so sorry that I have a cold, but here we go.
Yeah, right. I mean, they may be punished. Yeah. So talk us through that.
Yes. And look, I hear the thing out there is that when we get back, which we'll fight. I'll tell you what people are going to expect is they're not going to expect us to tinkle around the edge with the ACA. They're going to expect universal health care.
Okay. So somebody gets it. And it's true. People are, especially like after Luigi, right? After it's just, we've talked about these issues for how long now, right? These progressive policies, etc. But yes, people, after what's happening with the cuts to Medicaid, yes, people are going to expect universal health care. Problem is, Tim Walz is saying this. Kamala Harris should also be saying this, right? Because this is Tim Walz admitting, okay, here's where I think we may have went wrong. And when you look back at the platform of that particular campaign, no, they were not in agreement for universal health care. Everybody who was following me back then, you remember I went through the entire platform and I said, no, this should be universal health care, not let's expand Obamacare. Biden said that too. That didn't happen. I mean, it's just, yes, at this point, people are going to demand more. So I'm glad that he realizes that. Problem is, the leadership of the Democratic Party and the consultant groups that these presidential candidates choose to work with, they're more aligned to please the donor class, not to please the people, right? I said it from day one. Kamala Harris should have been running an anti-war, pro-worker campaign. Said it from day one. I mean, Bernie Sanders really did create the blueprint for this. It's not like you really got to do any research. You could just look at the videos from years ago from both of Bernie's presidential campaigns. That's what she should have been doing, but that's not who she is. Let's continue. There's more.
And if there's a lesson here, I always said this, we had a 1-vote majority in Minnesota when we moved clean energy, we moved reproductive rights, we moved a whole slew of progressive, very popular, including things around guns and gun safety, very popular things. We moved it with a 1-vote majority. And people ask, well, what do you call a 1-vote majority? A majority. Simple as that. These guys have learned that lesson, and governors have that ability. I'm in Europe trying to foster what I can on the trade. Now, look, if they cut our funding, it's $2 billion, you know, out of a roughly $30 billion state budget. So it is a massive hole that we can't fill alone, but there are things that we can do. There are things that we can push back on. There are things that we can separate. Now, the irony of this is Republicans being all about states' rights until they're not about states' rights.
Right, of course.
We're still establishing ourselves, you know, we're sub-federal level of government, but we have a lot of autonomy. Like I can be invited to the Netherlands to speak. And I said this, Molly, that I'm a rule follower that used to be politics ends at water's edge, means with a unified voice to that. I recognize that the position right now, official position of the federal government is that we're not going to support Ukraine. That's not the majority position of Americans. And you can walk.
Actually, that is in the recent polling, that is the position of the majority of Americans. In the recent polling, that is the case.
That line. And I think that's what we need to do more of. We need to push back. And again, I hope everybody, and I hope Republicans know this, you are teaching us a lot of what happens when we get back and control these, you know, that we need to deliver for people and that's their downfall in this. Where are they delivering for people?
Okay. So this is something that I will say, like, he has done this in his own state. There are examples you can point to where you can say Tim Walz did deliver for people in Minnesota, but there's also other examples. Like we can point out the free lunch, right? Free lunch, free breakfast for the kids. We can point to that, but we can also point at examples where he was not good on, right? Like we can point out that stop line 3, which he refused to do. Not good, right? Like, so the way that he treated the indigenous population, that can't be overlooked. That can't be ignored. The way that some of the Palestinian Americans that live in his state have been very vocal about him choosing not to meet with them and ignoring them and only meeting with the Israeli Americans in that state. These are things that are not good, that we do have to point out. He's wrong about the public opinion about Ukraine now. I don't think he's probably even seen the more recent polls, but people have been shifting their position on that because people are tired of these never ending wars. And we all know that Ukraine is not going to win. So there's that. So he's saying that the Democratic Party needs to do more. And he says, well, when we get back there, we're going to fight. That's where they're not going to fight. Because if that were the case, if they had been fighting all this time, we wouldn't end up here. You guys realize that? If they had been fighting all this time, you don't get Donald Trump for president in 2016. If they had been fighting, you don't get Donald Trump back in the White House again. But here it is back. And by the way, all of us that have complained about the economy, etc., noticed how the mood kind of shift. The economy is still trash. The grocery prices are still expensive. But I noticed some people who were complaining about it under Biden and Kamala aren't complaining about it anymore. Prices still look high to me. I don't know where everybody else lives, but they ain't gone down where I live. So there's those things, right? So there's the partisan dynamics and then there's policy and principle. And the problem with political parties that you run into is that the party needs come first. The needs of the party always come before the needs of you and your district and the working people. That's how it works. That's why you don't get the $15 minimum wage on a national level, which is actually behind what it should be if you adjust for inflation. That's why you don't get that. That's why you don't have the universal health care. And we can go into some of the historical implications about that, about why we didn't have it in this country to begin with, is because they didn't want Black people to have health care in this country because they wanted us to die off. There's a number of things that you can get into, but if we were in the World Series, actually, no. I don't want to jinx the Red Sox. I don't want to jinx them this year. Let's stick to basketball. If we're in the NBA finals and the Celtics are playing Cleveland. No, let's say, who do we just play? Let's say the Celtics are playing Dallas, right? Just like we did last time. And we're best of 7. And Dallas has already won game 1 and game 2. That leaves 5 games left. The Celtics are already behind. So even to even things out, you need to come back and win game 3 and game 4 to even it out. That's just to even it out. That's the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has allowed the Republicans to get ahead by that. They've allowed, more in particular, Donald Trump. They've allowed him to get ahead by 2, some may say 3 games, 4 games. They've allowed him to get ahead by that many games. And so the Democrats are always trying to play catch up. And the reality is, if you have to play catch up, you're already at a disadvantage. You're not just behind, you're at a disadvantage. And the problem is, in that particular example, the Celtics should take the lead. The Celtics should be up 2. And the Mavericks should be down 0. They should be the ones that have to catch up, right? But that's not what we have right now. Right now, you have the Republicans are up by 2 games and the Democrats 0. And they're trying to play catch up. Some would even say maybe they're up by 3 games and you're trying to come back from 3, which is especially hard to do. Let's continue.
Other than just angst and anger and taking it out on immigrants or whatever. No egg prices down.
Right.
Now you got folks that lost their jobs. Now you've got confusion with our neighbors. So I have to tell you, a saying I always said is you lead with good policy and good politics will follow that. And the inverse of that is true. Bad policy will lead to bad politics. And I think Democrats got caught in the wilderness that our policies are popular, but for whatever reason, we didn't articulate it in a way that turned to good politics.
So I have a theory of the case that I have shared with Biden world, and they're very mad at me, that the thing they did wrong was this cautiousness, this fearfulness about interfacing with media, social media, mainstream media. You know, if it's scary, shut it down. If it's too popular, like calling someone weird, shut it down. Talk to me.
Yeah, and look, it far be it from me to critique, because I own this, that it was my responsibility to help get this thing won. And so I'll take my shortcomings on this, but I do think there is a cautiousness around that. I think that we should be more willing to speak to people where they're at. I don't think we should be so worried about, are we putting ourselves out there and going to be asked hard questions? We should be asked hard questions.
Right.
And then we should lead and talk about the things that make a difference in people's lives. And I think people did not know how much better our economy was because they weren't feeling it. I think we left a void that they're going to fill. And you wrote about this, and you know this, Donald Trump's ability. And, I was like, they had JD Vance on every talk show. And most of the time I was like, oh my God, that's insane. But it was something, and people were seeing it and they were hearing it. And I think for us to get out there now, here's my theory on this.
Let me pause. Was that a nod or a side to Kamala or to Democrats as a whole? When he says that JD Vance is on all these different talk shows and we need to get out there, who's he talking about? Kamala did interviews. I know everybody's going to bring up Joe Rogan. She didn't end up doing that interview. We've talked about that before. And JD Vance also was on Joe Rogan. But it's not just Joe Rogan. I'm just saying, just in general, who is he talking about? Tim Walz was on one interview with Kamala Harris during the campaign, and that was the one with Dana Bash. We all talked about that one, and it was kind of weird because I think they only asked him like 2 questions. It was just kind of weird. He was kind of sitting there. Miss Kiwi says both. You think he's talking about both? Yeah. It's like, I don't know. And I think, and I've said this oftentimes before, that the people they really need to be talking to is not necessarily corporate media. That's a given. They're going to go on MSNBC and CNN, and Kamala did Fox News too. They're going to do that automatically. That's just how it goes. But I think these candidates should be appearing more on independent media, independent platforms. And everybody says Joe Rogan, but I'm talking about even different than that, right? Not just candidates, but also politicians, period. A lot of these politicians don't want anything to do with independent media. You can kind of tell the ones that do because you see their faces. You see them on independent media, right? So you've seen Thomas Massey on independent media, right? You see Ro Khanna on independent media. For the most part, I'm telling you from experience, and I think others can tell you as well, most of them don't want anything to do with independent media. That's part of the problem. We're going a little bit more here, and I'm going to show you Ro Khanna's response.
Let's do it.
And by the way, every single show, all the time. Like you have to flood the zone because people don't. It's not 9 interviews; it's 900.
Yes, and it's not linear, and you don't have to get a 10 out of 10 on every interview you do to be out there at points, especially if you believe in it. Now, the thing that I'm hopeful about, just to tell you in this is because I'm hearing it. Where are the Democrats? Where's the leadership? Where's the resistance? Where's all of this? President Obama made me in 2009 when he took office. He had about a 70% approval rating, far higher than this. He had the House and the Senate. There was no charismatic resistance. It was Boehner and Mitch McConnell. But you know what it was, and I experienced this. By the summer of 2010, the town halls, the stuff you're seeing in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, it's organic, and it was people. And the Republican leadership followed this. Now, I'm not going to say all of that was organic. It was funded. It was thoughtful. There were
astroturfed,
but a lot of it was relatively organic. And these are happening now in real time. And I think Democratic leadership needs to recognize that, seize upon it. If these town halls and public angst is there, at least get out there and throw some gas on it and get people gassed up, give them something to reason. And then we're going to have to recognize people want to see results. And I think our biggest strength right now is showing them their lack of results. But I hope somebody's thinking this through. What do results look like when we say we take the House back? What's that going to look like? I don't think over the last couple of years, no matter all the great work that I believe the Biden administration did, I don't think it translated much into the mainstream consciousness. And it may be your point on this is we should have just been flooding the zone 100% of the time. I'm an unabashed believer in a shadow government. We don't have the here to do it, but I think we should be doing that.
Well, and I also
Okay, so he brings up Barack Obama, some of the things that the Democrats should be doing. I don't know if they sent Tim Walz out there to kind of do damage control here for the Democratic Party. I don't know, but he's out there doing interviews. This isn't the only one that he's done like since they lost the election. However, oh my God, infighting. Ro Khanna saw, I guess, the clip of this interview that Ken Klippenstein shared where he said, like, people are going to want universal health care. And Ro Khanna said, glad to hear. But where was this during the campaign when you guys went out of your way to reject universal health care? Oh, let's start by admitting the mistakes of a status quo, establishment-led, consultant-driven 2024 failed campaign and platform. Damn. I don't know. That was wow. But Ro Khanna supported them and endorsed them. So keep that in mind. He supported and endorsed. But I don't know if he responded. One second. I'm so sorry, guys. I have a cold. Oh, Blakely responded. I was trying to see if. No, I don't think he did. Okay. I wanted to see if Tim Walz responded, but I don't see it. No, I don't see it. Okay. Interesting, folks. I don't know, man. But apparently the cat's out the bag with Tim Walz. Apparently he's not too fond of what they did. Very interesting. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.